What's up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of the G.R.I.T.S Co. It is I, Julian. We have Tadian, of course, Earl, and a very, very, very special guest, Mr. Jermaine Nakia Lee.
You need to put a "the" in front of that.
The Jermaine Nakia Lee. Okay, Charlotte Black Prize, co-founder, philanthropist, CEO of Pour No More, singer, songwriter, playwright. You can't tell from right now, but he has a lot of hats on top of this head of his. And we just honor you and thank you for joining us. So thank you again, just for
It's my pleasure to be here with you all.
Yeah.
We don't get a chance to commune like this. So this is beautiful.
Yeah,
absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And so that we can just kind of dive into things, you're welcome to talk about anything you want to.
Okay. Anything?
Anything?
What?
Yeah.
well, within
anything that we don't want to be talked about will be cut out in post.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
And I have a real 305 mouth, so that was profanity.
Come on, 305. Oh, we cursed that.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good. And speaking of 305, that's a perfect segue.
Yeah.
Because let's actually start kind of with that early life, talking about your roots, you know, where you were reared. Tell us a little bit about just kind of your foundation, 305.
Yeah, I love Miami because I've been in Charlotte long enough now to probably be a Charlottean, but even with all the madness going on in Florida, I'm still a Florida boy. And I really appreciate and value being able to grow up in Miami, Florida, around so many cultures. As I've traveled, particularly in the South, I realized what a blessing that was because it opens up your mind to other ways of thinking, other cuisine, other styles and attire and culture in general. And so it was a culture shock moving to Charlotte when I moved here 20 years ago, because Charlotte was not the city that it is now. But something just said, just stick in there, and at each turn, Charlotte was better and better to me and provided more and more opportunities for me. A lot of the hats that you say that I wear, I don't think that would have been my existence in Miami because there's so many Jermaine Nakia Lees there, you know what I mean? And here, just the land of opportunity. You know, back in the day, Charlotte was one of the gold rush cities. So people think of gold rush and they think of the West Coast, but Charlotte was actually one of the first. And so many people flocked here for prosperity and a better way of life. And I think that energy still exists, figuratively. This is still a gold rush city. But there's nothing like Miami, Florida.
Yeah.
You go in this corner, get Haitian food, you get Dominican food on that corner. You know, there's a festival for all of those various communities. I'm an island boy, so I come from a Bahamian family, a mixture of Bahamian and African-American folk. So that's the root of my culture. That's the root of my way of thinking. Very, very close-knit family, particularly on my father's side, which is where I feel like I got more of my rearing. Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah, lovely. In terms of that, I don't want to piss the girls off, but is Florida the South? Because, there's this ongoing debate about
yes,
right?
there is.
Okay.
There is. And geographically, it is.
Yeah.
I think culturally, people wonder if Florida is the South, and I think that's because they think of Miami exclusively. Yeah. But what they don't understand is North Florida is like you never left Georgia. Central Florida is the evangelistic capital of the world. All the biggest mega churches, other than Houston, are there.
Never realized.
It is diverse, but not nearly as diverse as South Florida. So South Florida it's a world of its own compared to those other regions. But Florida is the South, and what people don't, I think, take into consideration is that it sits right up against Alabama and Mississippi. And so there are a lot of Alabama and Mississippi transplants in Florida. That's why you can get some of the best soul food in Florida, because it's not like that deep gutter, South soul food from Mississippi or Alabama, right? And then you mix that, you go to the average African American restaurant in Miami will have a mixture of African American deep South cuisine and peas and rice and plantains and oxtails and all of these other island influences as well. So I do miss that.
Yeah. No, I love that. And in your context, you kind of open up this idea of exposure and how you feel like Miami really shaped your ability to see the world in a different way. I want to shift to a question here. As someone with so many different hats, how do you recognize or think about your journey of discovery in terms of exploring all those different hats, all those different talents, all those different gifts that you bring to the world today? What has been your journey of tapping into that and your journey of discovery throughout that?
Well, I think I had a couple of key influences in my life. One was my stepfather. My father was murdered when I was about 2 years old by his older brother. But I always had a male presence in my life. My mom remarried. My stepfather, Thomas, who's passed, gave me my baby sister, Melba. You know what I'm saying? But he was a lover of music. First of all, he was beautiful. He had beautiful, I remember him vividly. He had beautiful curly hair, little mini fro. He was a chocolate brown complexion. You remind me of him, actually. A lot. He was about your build, but he could do anything. He was a mechanic, he was a carpenter, he worked for the city, but people would have him do odd end jobs. He was a Renaissance man. But he loved soul music. And so I grew up listening to like real old school blues artists like Bobby Blue Bland and Denise LaSalle? Like these artists who's I can see the little vinyls in my memory. And he was a vocalist. So he would whistle while he worked. You know, when he was out in the yard, he would be singing Marvin Gaye or Temptations. So I had that, and that certainly is reflected in my musical style because I love soul music, and a lot of my music leans R&B. A lot of the music that I pen leans R&B and blues and gospel. And then my mom's the middle sister, Hilda, married a white American man, a hippie, so he had the long hair. And this is like, I'm really dating myself, but they had a waterbed. Like back in the day, that was a thing.
Yeah.
It's atrocious. It's full of bacteria. It's not a thing, but it was a thing culturally and style-wise then. And I love going over to their house. He was an architect, so he built their house. So the house still to this day, I think would be an architectural marvel because it was beyond its time in its architecture. But then he exposed me to bluegrass and opera. And so that's also reflected in a lot of the musicals that I write. They have, they're like, the music that I write is like soulful arias. And we would sit and listen to all of the greats and all of the more obscure musicians from the 1700s and 1800s. That really, really shaped me, as well as my Aunt Tanya. My Aunt Tanya was the unapologetically unabashed lesbian in the family.
Okay.
And she was a bad bitch. I guess she would be considered like a soft stud nowadays. She was beautiful and statuesque. Most of my family on my dad's side are all my complexion. But she was a woman, she knew she was a woman. And she accentuated that as well as being masculine presenting. And when I would spend the night at her house, she was partnered at the time. She and her partner raised her partner's son. Just for all of you out there who think gay people can't do that. Of course, he turned out to be heterosexual and he has a whole family of his own, right?
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought, right? And statistically, that's actually how it works. You know, the science will tell you that. But they would have these soirees. They had a beautiful house that kind of reminded me, if you ever watched The Golden Girls, it reminds me of The Golden Girls. The only difference was they had like a pool, like a lot of older Florida homes have a pool in the middle of the house. So everything to the left was living, den, library, office, and then there was a pool, and then there was the kitchen, and then the other bedroom.
Like actual pool.
An actual pool.
Inside.
Right. And so, no, it was outside technically, but
So
you know, in
it's-
Florida they put those
I got
screens
you.
around.
Yeah.
So I was looking, I was like, oh, that's such and such from Channel 9 News. And that's like, isn't it the sheriff? Like all these influential people would be at their parties.
That's the place to be.
It was the place to be. So that shaped and framed how I wanted to live and present, because I didn't know anything. Later on, I would discover some of the other not so savory parts of our community. But all that I saw at the time were same-sex attracted Black folk who were professionals, who were in their bag and living their best life and building families. And I thought, yeah, that's gonna be my story too, you know, and that's still my aim, you know. And I realized what a privilege it is to be able to have that exposure, because so many of us kind of were just thrown out there, you know, and our experiences are based on some of our experiences as young adults, and then we identify the whole community that way when our community isn't a monolith. We have families, and we have hoes, and we have athletes, and we have intellectuals, we have everything.
Yeah, all the things. Okay, so perfect segue, because you kind of touched on the experiences of Florida, and I know you moved here in like the latter half of your high school years.
Yeah.
Tell me what values from your childhood and adolescence make who you are today and all that you do possible.
So Florida has, some would argue, but I think Florida has really decent school systems. And so if you're a kid and you know what you want to do, literally from preschool to elementary to middle school to high school, you can take that track. I always knew I wanted to be a performing artist. And so I was able to have that experience in all of my primary schooling in South Florida. And I think that's very unique. A lot of communities don't, you know, they have a magnet school, if you will, here and there, but not like a real serious track. And had I stayed in Miami, which I planned to do, but my fast mama decided to move to Charlotte. But my aim was they had a transfer program from my high school directly to the University of Miami. So when I graduated with all of my freshman credits, because I took them during my junior and senior years. So yeah, New World School of the Arts. Shout out to New World School of the Arts.
Shout out to them. Yeah.
You can look on, if you ever go to any Broadway, you know, event, touring or on Broadway, and look at the playbill and read the bios, 80% of the people are going to be graduates from New World School of the Arts.
Oh, wow.
Not Juilliard, which is Juilliard's amazing. Not the School of the Performing Arts in New York, which has also produced amazing people. But like when you think about a lot of real working artists, they graduated from New World. Yep.
The greatest.
The greats. Yeah, I can't even name them all, but you know, some of them are names you will recognize, but they're all working artists. They're working, you know, and they're working in performance. They're working behind the scenes. They're working in direction. They're working in costuming, but they're working because the school really equipped us. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I would put your name right there with them. You know.
Oh.
I mean, let's talk about all the things.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
So we're going to attach that link.
I forgot we had a drink up in here.
Not
Cheers
me.
to that.
Cheers to
You might have gone.
preparedness.
Salute.
Eye contact.
Well,
But to talk about your, like your training, your greatness, all the things that you're able to do because of that foundation that was laid. How does it feel to have all of that, one, within you, but also to challenge yourself to evolve, not to be stagnant? What is that conversation that you have with yourself to take what was put into you and continue to nurture it?
That's good.
Yeah, that is good. I think that watching Beyonce's documentary film not too long ago, she mimicked a phrase that I say to myself all the time. My only competition is me.
Right.
There's just me. There's not another Jermaine Nakia Lee. And that's true of all of us. Like, my competition is me. So first I take an assessment of what I really think my abilities are. Like, what can I really achieve? And then I have a real conversation with myself about how to make that happen. I've had people say to me my whole life, "You're doing too much. Sit your ass down somewhere." And that is such a motivator, because what I really know, what the subtext of that really is I'm not doing enough, and you're doing too much, and you're making me feel inferior. You're making me think about all the things that I need to do.
Sure.
So yeah, I think that I am my own competition. Yeah. And so I'm gauging based on the life that I want to live and what I want to produce. Legacy is also a big thing for me. I think that comes from, I know that's a big thing in the Caribbean experience. So yeah, legacy is something that I've thought about since I was a boy. I understood that our time here is fleeting, and I don't know if there's a heaven or hell. I don't know. If it is, whatever. I don't know if we get another chance or another life, but what I know is I'm here in the present. So what am I going to do with this? And I don't think there's anything wrong with going to work, going home, watching TV, shitting, taking a shower, and repeat. Like, if that is your lot, so be it. I just knew I didn't want that to be mine. I'm a sad, so we got to have a little adventure,
A little spice of life.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm resonating with you. As you were talking, I was like, I like you. Because I feel a lot of what you're saying, and especially when you talk about hearing this tone of like, you do too much and all those things. I'm used to that as well. But I also understand the power of operating in my own capacity and not letting anyone define or limit that.
That's right. Because
so
too much is relative, right?
It's very relative.
It's personal.
Very subjective.
Yeah.
So thank you for lifting it up for those who may be watching too. To that question and to that point though, in terms of letting your light shine bright and operating in all these spaces, when we read over some of your articles and like blogs, you've worked with so many different people, right? Because you're letting your light shine bright, because you're doing too much. To name drop a few, like you mentioned, like Whitney Houston, like Usher, I'm like the gang of it all, right? But I want to go a different place. I don't want to go, what was that like? I want to go to the question of working with people here in Charlotte, also working with these world-renowned stars. What are you, what have you learned about humanity and our lived experience?
As it relates to celebrity, I've learned that they are very, very human. We deify them, but they are very, very human. After I graduated from UNCC, my first job was an intern at LaFace Records, which is now debunked, but it used to be the record company of super producer LA and Babyface. Pardon me. And they were the sound, all the sound at that time, this is in the 90s or mid-90s, was coming from Atlanta. Their headquarters was in Atlanta, so you had Dallas Austin, who had TLC, Jermaine Dupri, what's the guy who's a little heavyset dude that raps fast, something fast, Twister. They were all there and they were all doing their thing. And then,
You said that, Joe.
oh, you said
I did. Joe.
He did not say Fat Joe.
Girl.
Wrong.
I don't even know why he even
Just
said
wrong
anything.
generation.
That's New York.
Okay.
Edit that.
Stay at the end of the couch.
I wanted to say nothing.
Keep
But
going.
twist.
Yeah, please.
So I had an opportunity, Whitney Houston would come to the studio. A very, 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 very young usher
Wow.
would come to the studio. He was literally a teenager with his momager, and she was very serious. To be honest with you, all I wanted to do, because I had heard that LA and Babyface were producing Whitney's "I'm Your Baby Tonight" album, I just wanted to be in the studio. And I did get that opportunity, but I got a chance to talk to her in the lobby. And oh my God, you got to wait till my memoirs to figure out what she poured into me. But she poured into me. You know what I'm saying? She poured into me. And then there were other acts like After 7, TLC, those were all some of the premier acts on the label. And I got to witness that artistry and be a part of that amazing ATL music vibe that still exists and that really shifted R&B and hip hop during that time, particularly from a hip hop perspective, because hip hop at that time was primarily associated with the Fat Joe, with the Northeast. But Goody Mob and what's the group CeeLo was in? Oh my God. Oh my God.
2 years ago, everybody. Jesus.
They shifted everything because there's a particular style and cadence that we have as vocalist performers in the South, and they were talking about things that were part of the Southern culture, and now Southern rap is pretty much taken over, and a lot of the better, it's controversial for me to say, but a lot of the artists who become more premier are also from the South. Yeah, so that really shaped like what was possible for my life. They would eventually close down. Have you ever been to like Linden Square Mall? So you have right across the street is the Red Cross building, and their headquarters were there, and they decided to move to Los Angeles. And I got offered a job to move to Los Angeles, but I did not take the job because it was just too far from my mom, and my mom was going through some things. And I was upset at the universe about that because I had a personal responsibility to my mom. And I was like, why would you give me this opportunity, before she's rehabilitated and I can feel good about giving her that space? Because I literally was home every other weekend when I lived in Atlanta. But the universe has a purpose. Oh my God. I think I would have learned some other things. And my commitment whenever I am working for someone, I prefer to work for myself. But I'm not going to be expendable. So I'm going to present myself and my work in a way where you feel like you need me, and that's what I always share with all my mentees. But I came back to Charlotte, and that gold rush just happened. In so many ways. That gold rush just happened. I decided, you know what? Having been in Atlanta in this bustling Black LGBTQ community, why don't we have a pride here? Miami has you got Fort Lauderdale Pride, you got Miami Beach Pride, you got Miami Black Pride. Why don't we have that here? Because the people they're ready because they're going to other cities and making that jaunt. Why can't we do that here? And I got some other like-minded folk together, and we conceived Charlotte Black Pride, and then it rolled from there. So my kind of 3 directives have always been entrepreneurial, or probably creative first, community, and then entrepreneurial. Those are my 3 lanes, and I've done a lot in those lanes. And founded a lot of things in those lanes. But I know that it was because of the fact that I was in the right place.
Yeah.
So, okay, adding to that, right? Navigating those 3 lanes. What has been your foundation and support to sustain yourself in those spaces and taking care of yourself?
I appreciate that question. I don't consider myself religious, but I do consider myself spiritual. I don't know how one could look at the earth and think that this is all by happenstance. Like, this is, as an artist, I know another artist's work. This is artistry. You all are God's craftsmanship and artistry. So I always had a deep conviction about that. And I have felt guided by my ancestors in a very palpable way. Like, my dad, who was, murdered, has visited me. My grandmother has visited me. My grandfather has visited me. Aunts and uncles who passed on have visited me. And I think we all have the capacity for that connection, but you got to be on the right frequency and receptive to it, and know that it ain't the devil or witchcraft. Even if you subscribe to the Bible, the scripture in the Bible that says that we are something about a great cloud of witnesses, and what it's talking about the ancestors, people who come before us. We are all being guided by a great cloud of witnesses. So I think my relationship with the Creator, not with religion, but with the Creator, and there's some aspects of religion that I appreciate, and I think gave me some grounding when I was younger. But what I came to understand through my personal relationship with God is that God is omnipresent. God is like no respecter of person. He don't care what you got on. He cares about this right here, and the indwelling spirit inside of you, And so I've tried to, I haven't always, but I've tried to lead a life where my body and my existence were pleasing to God, And I'm not a Puritan or anything like that. People will tell you I'm not a Puritan. But like, I've never shared my body with anybody that I didn't care about. Like, that was important to me. I've never, I can go on and on. I don't know where we want to go with this. But yeah.
There's a lot to, you need to bring me back for a full episode on, like, I don't know, spirituality, like, that would be really cool, but let's go here. Just thinking about kind of what you mentioned, the cloud of witnesses.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about, like, your inspirations. You already mentioned your ancestors, but, the people whose shoulders ultimately you're standing on, right? Because we all have shoulders that we're standing on, people who have influenced us, guided us. As you think about those folks, how do they show up in the work that you do today?
The first figure I thought of is my mom. My mom is like my biggest fan. So much so if someone even come cross with me online, like, you should read her comments. Like, it's crass, but it's like, it's on time. That's my mom. My mom is my biggest fan, and ironically, I'm her biggest fan. Because when I consider the trauma and tragedy that she has faced, her mom was murdered by her younger sister. The love of her life, my dad, was murdered by his older brother. Sexual abuse and all these things that kind of happen, you would just think she should be committed somewhere. And she had her ebbs and flows, but like, she is phenomenal. And that gives me so much inspiration when I think about some of the tribulations that come in my life. I was just like, my mama did it. Yeah. And my mama did it as a Black woman in an era that was a lot less affirming to women than now. Yeah. And I'm cut from that same cloth. I got it. Whatever, I got it. That doesn't mean I won't cry. That doesn't mean I won't feel angst. That doesn't mean I don't need help. I absolutely need all of those things. and will and do feel those things, but there is an assurance in the back of my mind that this won't last always. There is a way out, and really this moment is like a microcosm in the greater story of your life. No matter what tragedy it is, someone's died, you're in financial distress. It's a microcosm in the greater story of your life. And so you just need to play the part and get through it.
Remain anchored.
There will be a happy ending.
Yeah. The next act, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I want to talk a little bit too about your next act, so to speak. Something that's really exciting. Love to talk a little bit about Charlotte Black Pride and your work there. I always enjoy the events. You see me out. I always love coming, getting the t-shirts, child. I'll be at the conventions and everything.
Thank you.
But this year, the theme is Pride on Purpose. Pop. We're making it pop this year. What does that mission and message mean to you? And how do you want people to show up?
Yeah, it means intention. It's a reminder to the community that we curate events for them with intention, based on deficits that might be in the culture in the community, and also based on their feedback. So we're Pride with the purpose. So yeah, we can wild out, we can have a good time, but there's also going to be events like we're doing a Black LGBTQ content creators meetup. Last year we did a public rally, and we were addressing the attacks on the trans community that was happening from our state and really happening around the country in a lot of southern states. So the Pride events are, yes, an opportunity for us to let our hair down and for us to connect with community, but let's do it on purpose. Let's have some purpose behind that. And we hope that the events reflect that. So Charlotte Pride is celebrating 20 years next year. 20 years.
Talk about legacy.
Oh, I can't, I was like, damn, I'm old. And I remember that first Pride. We actually broke the record for the highest attended first Black Pride. Right here in Charlotte, 7,000 people.
The gold mine.
The gold rush, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So, and again, it's an organization made up of primarily volunteers. I think there's been times when we had staff. We currently don't have staff now. So when you have an organization, particularly a nearly 20-year one, that doesn't have anybody on staff, sometimes some dots aren't, some T's aren't crossed, right? And so we've had some ebb and flow in leadership. But really for the last, I would say 6 years, we have just had a phenomenal team of leaders. We've been very intentional. Because I joke with my colleagues, I was like, Black Pride was real lesbianic for a moment. And that's because that was who the board consisted of. And so they curated events that looked like what they wanted to go to. Lesbianic and more mature age-wise, and now we've been really intentional. We have a transgender ambassador, we have a youth and young adult ambassador, and they bring perspectives that I don't have, because I guess I'm not a youth anymore, and I'm not a transgender, you know what I'm saying? And we have a senior liaison, because we have folk in our community who are seniors who don't feel placement.
You want that full spectrum representation.
Yeah, Pride on Purpose. Pride on Purpose.
Yeah. And that's so intentional too, because as much as, the queer community just writ large, talks about acceptance, diversity, equity, inclusion. Yeah. I think it's really important to have people represented in those capacities, and that's something that even I noticed just kind of watching the organization over the last few years. You all literally have some of everybody in a role.
Yeah.
And I'm
that's essential.
Yeah.
It's essential if you really want to meet the need.
Yeah.
It's essential. Got to have representation. We know that. Yeah.
So, In this journey of creating this, right, you just talked about, we're celebrating 20 years. Who has been along this journey to creating all of this and making this a possible thing?
Interestingly, it's not me. I wasn't along the whole time. I was on the board the first 2 years. And how do I say this? So my most of my co-founders were promoters, and I don't think they fully understood the fiduciary responsibility of a nonprofit. And I wasn't interested in going to jail. So, some things were being done with the money, not even in a salacious way. I just think it was just like
different lanes,
and ignorance. And, I was a different person then, so my presentation was probably different, so I probably communicated in a way where they didn't hear me. And I was asked to step down. And I did. But what I knew was I've been commissioned to develop Black LGBT culture in the Carolinas. So I started another organization. And we founded South Carolina's Black Pride. And we founded Raleigh-Durham Black Pride, Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill Black Pride, Triangle Black Pride. So I'm the co-founder of those organizations as well. We would haul our ass down the street and connect with people who we understood were thought leaders in the community, and kind of get a pulse of whether or not they were ready. We also at the time went to Charleston, and at the time they weren't ready. They have a pride now. I think we went to Winston-Salem. At the time they weren't ready. They didn't have the coalition yet.
Yeah.
But Columbia, as the capital of South Carolina, was ready. And the Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill area was ready. And those prides are still thriving today, and I'm very proud of that. So eventually, my co-founders were voted out by new board members, which is when I got an invitation back. And I don't think they had fully, I'm really sensitive about not causing chasms in the community. So I could have used my voice and my platform to denigrate it, but how could I do that? That's something I gave birth to.
Yeah.
I just knew that it would work out. And it did. And the very people who this is so interesting, the very people who they used to force me out had to eventually come to me and say, we want South Carolina Black Pride, we want Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill Black Pride, Triangle Black Pride to be a part of this coalition that we've created. At the time, the coalition was called the International Federation of Black Prides. It's now called the Center for Black Equity, but it's basically it is a resource for all Black prides all over the world. And it's on a membership basis, and they offer South Carolina Black Pride and Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill Black Pride membership. Yep. And then the leadership of the then Charlotte Black Pride eased me on in, because I think they thought that I left because I didn't care anymore.
You were done.
Like I was done with it, so they had me facilitate a couple of things here, curate some events here, and then eventually the chair was just like, I need you on the board, please. And it's been smooth sailing. It's not been smooth sailing because I was on the board. It became smooth sailing because like-minded and learned people were in leadership. And one of the biggest things that I've learned, that I'm certain that you all can relate to, is there are a lot of folk who have really good will, and want to do things to help the community in various ways, but don't have the talent or leadership for that. And that's a real hard truth, because sometimes people think just because they have the vision that it's for them to spearhead. Well, I knew I wasn't going to be going back and forth to Columbia. You know, I was going to be going back and forth to Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. I needed to go there and find leaders
who can execute it.
who can execute it, pour into them everything I got, and then put all the other resources that were available in the community and let them have at it. And it works, you know. So
Yeah.
It all works out.
Yeah.
it all works out,
And tapping people so they can be a part of that process too. I think like there's a whole, to Julian's point earlier, we can have offshoots of, we can have a whole series with this. Because even in terms of organizational capacity, like development, all the things, there's a whole conversation there because starting something, initiating something, being part of something doesn't mean having to own it all. And oftentimes it actually ends up being a lot more beautiful when you allow space for autonomy from others too.
Perspectives.
Yeah, and
Because
but
it's not yours. It's for
not.
other people to
Yeah.
flower
Yeah.
too. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
and we open yourself up to that and realize you're just a piece of that puzzle.
Gives you access to a whole grander scheme of things.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's that. That's very beautiful. We're going to transition to another segment in a second, which is one of our favorite parts of our show.
Okay.
And I'm going to let Julian kick that off. But I just wanted to kind of close this segment with a piece of, for those who are interested in Charlotte Black Pride, what's the information on how to find that? What are the dates? What are the themes? All of that.
Real simple, charlotteblackpride.org. And the dates this year are July 13th through the 21st. And there's a sundry of amazing events. Of course, we always have our Mr. and Miss Black Pride pageant. We kind of kick off with that. We have a town hall meeting that will be a screening of a documentary about Black trans men. Our town hall meetings are always amazing events that are not only informative, but a chance for us to get together and talk about what we need as a community, like do an assessment. And one of the things that we got last year was there needs to be more focus put on trans men. You know, there is a relevant and necessary focus being put on Black trans women because they are literally an endangered species in the South.
Yeah.
But we can't forget trans men and the role that they play. And the support that they play for a lot of Black trans women and for gay men. You know what I mean? Some of my besties are trans men. You know what I mean? So that we do another event that's more like a art and culture event called Center Stage. And each year it has a different theme. Last year the theme was a tribute to Beyonce in song, dance, and visual art. This year the theme is I Love the 90s, a tribute to the 90s in song, dance, and visual art. Charlotte has like amazing vocalists and amazing actors, but let me tell you something, the dance community here is bananas.
Yes.
And it's really being led by Black and brown LGBTQ folk, like everything else.
Sounds about right.
You got the sauce.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was charlotteblackpride.org.
charlotteblackpride.org.
Be below.
Yes.
Click the link. Accessible.
July, thank you. July 13th to the 21st.
All right.
And I also want to ask you just to plug really quickly your very own creation, your brainchild, something that I know that you love and care about and been writing on for years. For the love of Harlem, can you tell them why you love Harlem and what that experience will be like later this month?
If there is like if we have multiple lives, one of my lives was during the Harlem Renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
I feel so, I don't even know how to explain it. I feel so connected and aligned with that era. First of all, it was a wonderful era in that there was the great Black migration where Black folk were moving from Jim Crow South and the lynchings and all the other things that took place there. And so there was just a vibrancy, you know. Some of them went to Chicago, some of them went to St. Louis, some of them went further left, but a lot came to New York and settled in Harlem. So it was just a vibe. And like, if I could go back in time, I would just want to be a part of that vibe. I love the music. I love the jargon. I love the way they dressed. And so it was really an awakening and a flowering of Black culture in America where white folk realized, oh, like there are thinkers, like there's intellectuals like W.E. Du Bois, and there's poets like Langston Hughes and Wallace Thurman, and there's visual artists like Aaron Douglas. You know, they're political types like Elaine Locke. I think everybody I just named was LGBTQ or queer on the queer spectrum. So either they were LGBTQ plus, or they were LGBT, or they were queer, like a Zora Neale Hurston, who was a lover of men, but she preferred the company of gay folk. You know, so I guess because Black folk, were less concerned with some of the religiosity that they. I want to be careful. You know, so because I'm a Christian, I consider myself a progressive Christian, but that's not our indigenous religion, right? And it was a religion that was used to oppress us. And we still use that religion to oppress each other today. You know what I mean? So
Clock it.
it's
Wow.
people in that era were like, I'm just glad not to be lynched. I'm glad my husband is not being castrated.
Yeah.
I'm glad my daughter is not being raped. I don't care what the gay folk. Let the gay folk do what they do. And so gay folk ran the Harlem Renaissance, you know, and no one ever taught me that. That came out of some of my studies in college. It piqued my interest. And then in my own independent study, I was just like, yeah. Like all of the pioneers were primarily same-sex attracted, bi, or queer. You know, this is a movement that transformed not only how white Americans saw Black people, but how the world saw Black people. And most of them, with a few exceptions, would go on to have worldly careers where they were to bring that art and our culture and our way of being. And the other thing about them is they were all unapologetically Black.
Yeah.
You know? And that's okay, especially in an era like that of oppression. They were unapologetically Black. Yeah, you want to sponsor me? Vanity Fair or, Time Magazine or, some of the other publishers that published some of our literary artists in the time. But like Zora, she was like, but I need to be able to write in the Black vernacular. They wanted her to write her poetry and her short stories and her plays in the King's English. She was like, no, this is a part of Black culture and there's nothing to be ashamed of. There's beauty in that dialect and that jargon and those euphemisms that come out of our communication. And she died broke because of it.
It's a sacrifice.
Because she wouldn't, some relented, but most did not. Especially when most of her colleagues, were leaning toward what their white patrons wanted them to do. There's a cool book called Letters from Zora to Langston. And this is when she left New York. She had to leave New York, go back to Florida, where she was from and where she died. And she was just reading him for filth. You Uncle Tom, you this, you abandoned me, you because she didn't feel like he supported her. And what I also learned in my studies of the Harlem Renaissance is that a lot of white literary theologians have kind of decided who our figures were, our key figures. But when you really look at the publications and stuff during that time, Langston in the Black community wasn't nearly as popular as Wallace Thurman. You don't even hear that name. But he appears in my musical, For the Love of Harlem. You got to reel me in because I love Harlem Renaissance. So the musical takes place in a weekend in the life of Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Wallace Thurman, who was an author. He was actually an author, the very first black author black editor, of a white led and operated publication. He was an encyclopedia. He was just amazing. Zora Neale Hurston and Aaron Douglas. And if you ever Google image Harlem Renaissance, his stuff comes right up. And it's like these shadowy figures. That's Aaron Douglas. Most people don't know they were all roommates at one point. They shared a Harlem brownstone that they nicknamed the Niggerati Manor. And it was a play on the nickname that the white literary community had given them, which was the colored literati. They were like, no, we're the Niggerati, and this is the Niggerati Manor. And Ramir Bearden, who is a visual artist who was born here in Charlotte, but his family moved to New York. He used to hang out with them. Now, he was a teenager at the time, but he would hang out with them. There's just so many parallels. And in that house, they would have what's called at homes. And that was really the beginning of what we understand to be like open mics, and poetry spots where there would be singing, there would be dancing, there would be, poetry reading. And then Lilia Walker, who was the daughter of Madam C.J. Walker, the first black hair care millionaire, she loved the gays too. Mm-hmm. And so she had a Harlem brownstone called the Dark Tower, and she would host these monthly events there. And it said that like the artistic community would be there, educators and thinkers would be there, hoodlums and prostitutes would be there. It was all the things. And then they all frequented what was called drag balls, which is the precursor to what we understand to be the house and ball community now, where you could come in either watch and voyeur, and the white people would be, this is one of the few places where normally they put us in the balcony. The white people would be in the balcony enjoying the show, and women would come masculine presenting and men would come female presenting, and there would be like a pageant. And that's the origin of the house ball community that we know today. It didn't just start in the 70s. It started in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah. So does your play explore all these different dynamics over the course of a weekend?
Mm-hmm. It's a fun-packed weekend. Yeah. And this particular weekend that I chose, I won't give that away. This particular weekend that I chose, one of the clan died. And so also what happened during that time was the Great Depression, which is really why the Harlem Renaissance is such a short period, because we experienced that economic downturn, and of course it affected us as people of color the most. If white people were in soup lines and bread lines, that in Jim Crow America that black people had it the worst, and so the artists weren't getting the funds from the patrons and the international opportunities to travel that they were before. And one of the cast members passed away during that time, and the Harlem Renaissance, actually two of the cast members passed away during that time, and the Harlem Renaissance kind of was watered down because it was just about survival. But what I'm excited about is I feel like there's been little renaissances. Mm-hmm. I feel like Charlotte is experiencing one right now. When you think about the art and culture scene, and who's leading that scene, it's us. It's brown and black people and queer people.
Yeah. Supporting each other too, that working laterally, I think is really beautiful right now.
Yeah.
Just that people are locking arms and coming together. Yeah. Because like, yeah, it's one thing, of course, to have those institutional dollars, folks to back you up, so you can make these things happen. But working with other creatives that are Black, that kind of lock in with you,
Yeah,
like, it's just makes it even more special.
It makes it an invincible legacy.
Yeah.
It's because they're all the things that they did. They had this magazine called Fire, and the community was so pissed off by the magazine because it had County Cullen was like he was a poet. He was a sonnet poet, so he wrote love poems. He was in love with Langston Hughes, and so he had a section of it where everybody knew he was talking about Langston, and we addressed that too. And Zora Hurston had a short play in there, and there was art from some of the artists there. W.E. Du Bois, who was a thought leader at the time, he hated it. And he actually encouraged the community to gather them all up and burn them all. But I actually have an original copy.
Oh, wow.
I would love to see it.
I actually have an original copy.
So tell the people where we can find tickets, all the information about your upcoming show.
So check it out. You'll have no reason not to come.
Period.
Saturday, June 29th at Camp North End in the Ford building. If you've ever been to the Vegan Fest, that's the Ford building at Camp North End. The event is absolutely free. This is not going to be the musical, but it's going to be an immersive Harlem Renaissance experience. So that when you walk in the door, you're going to be transported back to the 1920s and 30s Harlem Renaissance in various ways, in music, in dance, even in culinary arts. We have one station where you'll be able to sample the kind of food that they prepare at a rent party. Y'all familiar with a rent party, right? Which were very popular during that time. There will be visual art stations and murals that you'll get to contribute to. There'll be films playing. So there will be films on the loop about the Harlem Renaissance, its impact today. And we're very grateful to Camp North End because they sponsored the space for us. We're able to pass on that savings to the community. And so we're touting the event as the Black Music Month event of 2024, because June is Black Music Month. So the week prior is Juneteenth, and I'll be at the Do-Rag Festival at the same location at Camp North End. And then the following week is us. So we just go black Camp North End. It's going to be a great time. This is an event for the whole family until 9 p.m. And we'll be hosting a Harlem Nights mini ball at 9 p.m. with a couple of thousands of dollars in prizes. So we're going to just touch on it all. Touch on the beauty, the resilience, the talent, in our community.
I'm so excited for it. Ooh, I'm gonna be out there all day.
Oh yeah, it's from like noon to midnight. So
You're gonna see me, I might go, leave, and then come back.
I'm definitely going to go and leave and come back, yeah. So from noon to midnight. So there'll be vendors there. We're doing a Harlem 21st Street marketplace. If you've ever been to Harlem, on Saturday, 21st Street is just like a market village. So we'll be mimicking that with Black and Brown owned businesses.
I love it. I love it. This is all the things, right? Like, thank you. Thank you for all that you're doing to contribute to not just culture in terms of Blackness, but also the entire, all the things, and just making sure there's always spaces for us to feel seen, heard, and felt.
Yeah.
Appreciated and valued, and then even a little bit more. So we are grateful. All three of us are grateful for your work. Our community is grateful for your work. Charlotte is grateful because of your work in the world as a whole. So how can the people, are we still, what are we doing? How can people learn more about you or connect with all of your work as a whole?
Mm-hmm. One of the projects, you can at Jermaine Nakia Lee, and should have come up, right? Jermaine, Jermaine, Nakia, Nakia, Lee, Lee. One other project we didn't mention that I just want to mention because the enrollment has opened. So I was really blessed to be a part of a fellowship at, it was the African American Cultural Center then, it's now the Harvey B. Gantt Center. But I was a teaching artist there and one of their first fellows. And one of my mentors, Vicki Graham, who's passed on, she wanted us to be artist entrepreneurs. And what she realized was that, she would ask some of us for invoices and we didn't know what invoices were. And we all had these amazing ideas for events and we put all this work into the event, but we didn't know how to write a press release or communicate with television media or radio media. Many of us didn't have an elevator pitch. Somebody, you're in the elevator with somebody who gives you some money, like you have a pitch. Many of us didn't know how to self-market. And so we experienced all of those courses and it changed the trajectory of my career. Because I didn't need any longer to wait for somebody to hire me as a stage director or an actor. If I had a vision, I knew how to write grants, because we learned that, to fund my own events, and I knew how to market and promote those events. So in 2021, I kind of, as I work with a lot of artists all the time, began to feel that same frustration she had. That I was working with artists who put all of this work into a wonderful event, but nobody knew about it. And some of them didn't do a budget and didn't even know how to draft a budget. So I came up with Kuwamba Academy, really as a tribute to my mentor, Vicki Graham. And Kuwamba Academy is a 9-month fellowship that offers artists of color artistic and professional development. And it's all tuition free, right? So if you're interested, look up Kuwamba Academy. We'll just go to @Kuwamba Academy NC.
Click below.
Kuwamba Academy NC. And if you're interested in taking your career to another level, if you feel like your career is stagnant, if you feel like your career is kind of in a cul-de-sac, this is the place for you. If you're a performing artist, if you're a literary artist, if you're a media artist, if you're a healing artist, we open it up. The second class to healing artists, the people who do work around healing. This is the class for you. It transformed my life and it transformed our original graduates. So our first class graduated January 2004. And other than seeing my kids born, I don't think I've ever been so proud. These are people, many of them who had never written a grant and of course never received a grant. As I said, didn't know how to do a budget. For those who are visual artists, they didn't know how to negotiate the prices of their art, all of those things. All of them were grantees before they left. All of them. There are a lot of grant workshops. You can't go to a grant workshop for a couple of hours and learn how to write a grant. It has to be a lot more comprehensive than that. And so we were able to give them the tools to really be artists, entrepreneurs. So I encourage you, Kuwamba Academy, KUUMBA Academy NC. Check it out.
Thank you. Thank you all for tuning in and watching, listening to this amazing episode. Yet another episode of the G.R.I.T.S Code. Again, as always, thank you for your love and support. Do not forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. As always, sending you love and light. Thank you, Jermaine.
Thank you all. This is a pleasure.
Your work. Don't forget to look at each other up. Thank you all.